All right. Hello. Welcome to the Knowledge Commons. My name's Andrew Padilla. We have my co-host Jessica and Joel Natividad. Hey, everyone.
Hello, hello. Glad to be here.
Excited to have you. So I have to inform you that I've known Joel for a number of years. He's the owner of That Here, which is a company that specializes in CCAN solutions, but also has a big time background in just the open data ecosystem. So looking forward to picking your brain and finding more about what your perspective is on the open data ecosystem, knowledge, data portals, et cetera. So let's go ahead and start. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role in Dat Here, and how you came to be into this knowledge commons kind of arena?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So it all started around the 20th anniversary of the web. And if you recall, around the time, around 2008, 2007, Tim Berners-Lee made that big TED talk calling for raw data now. And that was the beginning of open data. And I was a big fan, and I've been following it ever since. And when Bloomberg, who was mayor of New York City back then, announced the New York City Big Apps Challenge. We threw in our hat and we built a solution to, using some semantic technologies to classify the data that they were publishing. So we won that one as with the company I was working for at the time. And then the following year, when I told my boss we need to do it again, he declined because beyond the press op opportunity with the mayor, we didn't really get any business from the city. So I put in my papers. My co-founder, we worked out of his basement for 6 months, and thankfully that gamble paid off. We won the challenge, and from there we started my first startup, Ontodia, and it's ontology encyclopedia. So basically, we're trying to organize all the open data. We were using semantic MediaWiki to do that. And then we fell into CCAN because we said, okay, we're cleaning all this data. We need to park the data somewhere. And that's how we got into CCAN. And then we became the first professional service partner here in the US. And a few years later, we were acquired by OpenGov out of the Valley. And after that little detour through Silicon Valley, we decided to make a go at it again, trying to really do our original vision of trying to organize, civic data. So yeah.
And so I'm interested, Joel, how did you become interested? What piqued your interest about open data and the data commons? How did you get involved?
Yeah, I'm the son of two civil servants, right? So I always had this suspicion that, when I would visit my parents at work, I said, this can all be computerized. Why is this all filing cabinets and paper pushing and everything? But they were totally against me being in the public sector. And that's one reason why they forced me to immigrate from the Philippines to the US. And then I still had that itch calling to do something. And open data, I thought, was that opportunity because, we were helping build solutions, data management solutions for the private sector. And I said, hey, this is basic stuff. They're really starting from ground zero in the public sector. Maybe we can do something. Yeah, so that was the genesis of why I was really attracted to open data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So can you tell us, Joel, a little bit about the progression of your career? I guess from, everybody starts with scratching an itch and then it evolves to something bigger, something greater, up to present day with that here. Can you dig in a little bit on that?
So yeah, so we we bootstrap the original startup, my first startup, Natividad. We were incubated by NYU, right? So we had access to the city's data, and we were building data portals here in the Northeast, for Pittsburgh, for Newark, for Boston, and and it we wanted to scale it up, and we thought the data portal was just the pit stop, right? Because before you really curate high quality knowledge, we thought we need clean data first. So we thought we need to go through that data portal route first. The real ambition, and we started building it. We built this thing called civic dashboards, and what we did was we started compiling KPIs on time and location from disparate data sets, because the data sets, they didn't have common keys. So we said, but most of them were time series, most of them had location data. What if we just fuse the data based on time and location, and what insights can we derive? So we built that, and then we got acquired by OpenGov, and they had a little interest on it, civic dashboards, but that actually, I don't know, for one reason or another, they were only interested in the CCAN part. And we did eventually deploy almost 100 data portals across the US, using CCAN, using it as a software as a service. But that itch was always there for me. I mean, what if we start linking these data sets? One thing I thought I was really excited about, because I don't know if you know OpenGov, but they're like, sometimes the way I describe them is they're like the QuickBooks of government.
Yeah.
And
it's great.
We were thinking, what if you can link the outcomes to the money, to the taxes collected, right? We were always thinking that would be, what if you could do that crosswalk, right? This part was funded by this grant, or was funded by this, by this contract, right? If we can start linking that, we never really got there, but that's why we're trying to do it again. But this time we're bootstrapping once again.
Once again, what on that note, because you've played your entire career in open data in some form or fashion, how would you define open data and the data commons? Those are two distinct things, I know, but
Yeah. Well, open data, if you look at, I'm cheating here, I'm looking at the open data definition, and it says anything that anyone can freely use without encumbrance, like no license, you don't have to pay, it's along the lines of the Freedom of Information Act, right? That's the justification for open data. And oftentimes they would cite what happened with GPS data, which was used for targeting missiles. It became like foundational open data for everything, for driving our cars, for farming, for everything. And then the human genome was open data, the Human Genome Project. The data from NOAA is open data, right? And we thought those were for the different sectors. What if we did this at scale for everything? Like for buildings, for building permits, for everything that the government does. Nowadays, it's all born digital. Nobody really uses filing cabinets anymore, right? So what if and that's data we paid for, right? What if we do something with it? Because a lot of this data exhaust is a byproduct of this old institutions, like if you go to the building department, you need to file because for safety reasons. But then they collect a lot of data. They're only collecting it for the purpose of their mission, to make sure you build safe buildings. But all that information you give them, what if you can crosswalk that with other data from another agency, from the police department, from the health department, right? Well, what kind of insights? Because everybody was touching like different parts of the elephant, right? They were just, oh, I'm just all about buildings, oh, I'm all about health, I'm all about this. What if we fuse that data and it's freely available? You don't have to pay a license to anybody, right? So that was the exciting part about open data.
And so that led to the data commons. So the idea of,
Mhm.
yeah, the data commons, if you were to define that, what would you, how would you define it in your words?
Data commons, it in my words, I mean, to me, the commons in general to me is what is really freely available to everybody. It's the commons, right? Like in the physical world, we have parks, we have the shared infrastructure that we all use. To me, those are the commons. And in my mind, the tragedy of the commons comes to mind
Yep.
because oftentimes you look at things that are in the commons that if you pitch it to a VC, they would say you're crazy, right? Like if Wikipedia say, okay, here's this website, nobody pays for it, and it's all just volunteer people just
Yep.
curating data, and it killed the encyclopedia industry,
Mhm.
right? And to me, it's a valuable part of the commons. And the same thing is true with everything else, like in the physical world, like the roads and infrastructure, the highways. The commons to me is things that benefit everybody, but it seems that it's like has to be paid for, and supported, using mechanisms like taxes and the government.
Mhm.
Typically, the government is, what the private sector won't do or cannot do.
And it is a form of infrastructure. That's a great way
Right.
to phrase it. Absolutely.
It certainly is. So Joel, given your proclivity to establish relationships between things that are otherwise not related, developing crosswalks, we take that and turn it inwards towards the topic of open data and data commons. What do you see as a relationship between open data as a topic and the data commons? What do they have? How do they relate to each other in your mind?
In my mind, it's the open data is the raw material that we can deploy to really make compelling data products in the commons that people will look for. But at the end of the day, I think people don't really care about the raw data. There has to be some storytelling, right, and contextualization in the middle, and maybe things like Wikidata, Wikipedia. They use a lot of open data, but then they transform it into stories that animate and has context.
And all the stories link to each other, which is fascinating. I mean,
Right.
that's the essence of it, is
Hmm.
that web.
Yeah, it's just this emergent property once you start linking data,
Yes.
right? That is pretty exciting. No, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So with that realization, what do you think some of the misconceptions are that people have about open data, particularly those that aren't, well versed into the topic?
Yeah. If you look at the state of open data, I have to admit, as a practitioner, it's kind of sad. We're kind of stuck in the early days of open data. There was a lot of excitement during the early days. It was like the first executive order
Mhm.
signed by Obama on day one was the Open Data Act, right? And then the Evidence Act was one of the rare pieces of legislation that had unanimous support by both parties when it passed in 2017. And it was the Open Data Act. Actually, they also called it the the Evidence-Based Act. That was a formal name. They always come up with this. I don't know what open stands for. It comes some government acronym for it, but it also was named the Evidence Act. And to me, that was the more appropriate name. But because the thinking there, if you look at the bill, was it's all about evidence-based policymaking. Uh, and I think we're stuck in the here's the data, like the data vomit phase. Like here's data, go at it. uh, and sadly, it's not like publish it and the apps will come. This was also coincident with the early days of the smartphone, if you recall, when people were, oh, there's an app for that, and what if people built all kinds of apps using open data. But yeah, I think it's still in the raw data phase. And I hope that if we transition it into more, and that's why I'm attracted to the data commons and your knowledge commons thing, is more actionable data, that's been curated, it's actionable, it's humanized, contextualized, not just raw data. Right now, honestly, it's a lot of it is raw data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So given your kind of portrayal of the state of open data, what makes you persevere? Why is open data so important? Why are you here today doing what you do?
I think I'm still convinced. Now people make fun of that McKinsey study that projected that it's like the value of open data is in the trillions of dollars. I forget the exact figure, but it was like this. When I first saw that study, I said, "No, that's crazy." But I'm still convinced of the potential, because if you look at the study, they called it the liquid information. They didn't really call it open data. It's basically we're all producing data now, right? Everything is producing data, and it's not going to get less. The volume will only get more, right? And then the velocity is even faster and faster. And now we have AI, right? And even that is creating synthetic data, right? and then now we have hallucinations, right? So I still think there's a role in making something out of that raw data, curating it, and making it actionable. You know, so that's why we're doing it. In that domain, like one thing I'm excited about, and we have a collaboration on this, Andrew, in New Mexico,
Mhm.
right? Is the whole Internet of Water vision, which I'm very excited about because we're helping both Texas and New Mexico with that. And their ambition there is collecting all this raw data from all the jurisdictions in the state, right? And then linking them together, right? Ultimately. So as we know, rivers, the Colorado River doesn't respect any political boundaries. It just goes on its own, right? But the way we manage water is people keep just drilling deeper and deeper, regardless of what the downstream aspects of what happens. So we hope that maybe if we pivot in the open data space to answering questions in specific domains like water data, which nowadays with what's happening, with climate change, with wildfires and droughts, right? Hopefully will animate, if we start with the questions first rather than, okay, here's the data, right? If we start with the questions and then see, okay, what does it take to answer this question? Okay, I need raw open data from the state. I need data from the water utilities, and I need water readings from the university to get the big picture of the landscape for water availability, right? Especially like a lot of big cities, they're not supposed to be there. They're in the desert. But we address that because we have physical infrastructure that gets water from different places, but as we know, that's not sustainable. So we need we need to have that linking of the big picture of what where the water is.
Yeah. Obviously, I agree with that statement, and certainly transboundary and/or cross-organizational data is more powerful than I think people imagine. Which brings me to another question. Certainly data itself within organizations has been having a pretty good ride in terms of data is important. Data is the new oil and everything else that comes about regarding conversations about data. But it's really focused on data produced within and used by the organization to develop insight. How do you see the data commons, which spans beyond the organization? How do you see that playing a role in the organization itself? Basically, external data, and then by extension, society as a whole.
Right. So, I got my start out of New York City, and in my open data journey, and thankfully, we still keep in touch with them. And they're one of the few municipalities with an open data law, right? And last year they just appointed their data governance officer, right? Director of data governance. And now, as like you said, people are appointing chief data officers, right? So there's this realization that how you manage your data as an asset is really critical. And even in our space of open data, we kind of pivoted as well, because what we realize is the main customer of the open data initiative traditionally was the public, the general public, right? But you should really prioritize your internal customers, because they're the ones who produce the data. And if you want to transition them from people who see the open data mandate as a burden, oh, I have to update the data portal again, right? And it's not something that supports their day-to-day work. And that's why we're looking at open data more as a verb. So opening data as a verb to us now means, okay, here's your operational data. You need it for your day-to-day work. We want to help you be more effective in using it in your day-to-day work, and not just to comply with your data mandates, your data publishing mandates. So what we do is, this one thing we built for Texas is, we're calling it we're flipping the script. So instead of curation being seen as, oh, I have to compile all this metadata manually, and I have to enter it, and it has to be, oh, using this vocabulary, I have to do this schema, oh, I have to update the data dictionary. We want to do it so that they put in their data, and then it does all that for you. A lot of it, by just doing summary statistics, compiling frequency tables, and then compiling draft data dictionaries, draft metadata suggestions. So you still need to accept it, but it's, a lot of the hard grunt work of compiling metadata is done for you. And we want to cross that threshold that they want to open the data for themselves, for their internal workflow. Because now they know, okay, I dropped this 10 gigabyte file, and it told me the shape of the data, and it told me, oh, there's PII in that data. You may want to scrub that before you publish it, right? Because there have been incidents in open data where people accidentally publish PII data, and instead of being, that became like a negative feedback too. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather not publish again, because, I actually made a boo-boo. I published some PII data. So we wanted to remove all those excuses away. So opening data as a verb, and if you do that properly, publishing to the open data portal is just a switch, right? Because then it's not something you have to do. You didn't need to compile all that metadata just for the public because they're not in the domain. It's also useful for you.
Love that. It's like turning something that was a chore fraught with minefields into more of a dialogue, which people naturally or have an affinity to, like that.
And it's
Right.
super interesting because before we went live, we were talking about workflow and how important those are. And I know for my, I in my mind's eye, I see workflow and governance going hand in hand. If you establish a really healthy, strong workflow or workflows that supports work, or towards especially the data commons. Can you touch on workflow and its role in the data commons and what you've been working on?
Yeah, we're trying to make it as friction-free as possible. That they want to open the data. They want to drop it into the data portal. So I drop it into the data portal. Even before publishing it, so it tells me things I didn't know about my data. It will tell me, oh, did you know that your colleague just published something that may be related to your data? Did you know that there's PII data in there? Did you know that there's outliers in the data? Right? You didn't know unless you really did rigorous analysis just by dropping that data in there. We wanted to, because we saw it in all our deployments across the US when we were deploying data portals. There's this like, it's a chore. Right? You have to force people to curate the metadata. So, and that's human nature.
Mhm.
And we're competing with Facebook. We're getting trained. Our attention in the attention economy. People just don't have patience.
Yep.
Right. So you need to make it as friction free, and there needs to be an incentive. What's my reward for doing that? Here's a reward. It shows you things you didn't know about your data. It preemptively links it to related data sets in the catalog that you didn't know about. Yeah. It tells you about outliers that was in the data that maybe was a fat finger mistake that
Right.
it caught that. Yep.
Which is so powerful, when you can give also that feedback to consumers and to, data workers. I'm also interested because we talked earlier about AI and the role of AI, at least in what you're building now. And in general, if we can expand into the implications of AI for open data and the data commons.
Yeah, of course we have to have AI. And
Yeah.
the great thing with AI is metadata is the perfect context for AI, right? And it's small, it's relatively small, even if you're describing terabyte scale data sets, the frequency tables, the summary statistics, you're talking kilobytes of data. And once you have that context, what we've been doing is we've been using that. I don't know if it's called RAG, but we send the data dictionary, the summary statistics, and the frequency tables with a prompt to LM. And what we prompt it for is not the answer. We prompt it, this is my question, give back a SQL query that will answer this question. So the beauty of that is it's reproducible. There are no hallucinations because I'm doing a deterministic SQL query, right? And it knows the schema because I gave it a data dictionary, I gave it the frequency tables, it knows how, oh, this is a unique key, right? And it's been pretty good.
Pretty reliable.
Pretty reliable because the SQL query is deterministic. It will work or it will not work, right?
Right.
Right. So yeah, and we've been happy with that experiment, and yeah, we're starting to do more experiments now that we're doing this draft workflow, where one of the things we want to do, and we're starting doing it with another project we're doing with the University of Pittsburgh, where we use AI to summarize what the data set is about. Because once again, we don't have to upload, a 10 gigabyte data set. We just upload the data dictionary, the frequency tables, and the summary statistics, and it tells you, oh, this is what the data is about, and it only, in number of the tokens you use is not that much. So yeah, that's that we continue experimenting with that, and we're launching it actually. The project I was referring to is we have an NSF funded project with the University of Pittsburgh. So we helped them build the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center. One of the great things that Pittsburgh did when they first engaged with us in 2015, when the city of Pittsburgh realized that it shouldn't operate the data portal, they decided the university should operate. And not just for the city of Pittsburgh, but for all of Western Pennsylvania. Because the great thing about that is university had the data engineering, data science skills, right? The data curation skills, and they were a trusted intermediary, right? So yeah, that's been good. So what we've been doing with them, with the WPRDC, is working on a project for the NSF called Pathways to Open Source Ecosystems. And what it is we want to build a civic data ecosystem using CCAN. One other development in the space that is really interesting is the whole trend of digital public infrastructure and public interest technology, right? Not to go into too political topic, like Doge is doing a lot of supposed efficiency, but we hope it becomes like part of the technology stack for building, like what we think are like highways for data. If we had if the Eisenhower interstate system enabled interstate commerce, right, and really brought together the different states as one nation, right? We think we need like a highway system for data. So we have another project that's related to the I'm meandering now, but I want to mention this. The National Science Foundation has another project. They call it the National Secure Data Service, and we're working with Mathematica on it as a subcontractor. But basically, the vision there is to build what I'm calling like the digital highway for data, National Secure Data Service. So it starts with government, as with most things, right?
Yeah.
Like if you recall, the highway system was a military project.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be so tanks and planes can land anywhere. But as with most things, this NSDS project is for government to have middleware for data exchange, and we hope that becomes like the highway for data for everybody at scale. But yeah.
And then like obviously data commons and open data has become very valuable for AI and AI training. What are your thoughts and what have you observed in the wild in terms of the quality or how it's being leveraged or anything?
It's interesting you mentioned that. During the public comment period for the DCAT 3 US spec, we participated in that public comment period. And one of the issues I opened was we have robots.txt, right, for telling web scrapers, don't index this. And is there an equivalent for data portals? And should we even do it, right? And if we do it, will the AI crawlers even respect it, right? Because we know that their stand is, it's data. I don't want to be controversial, but even with copyrighted data, they say, so long as we can crawl it, we'll crawl it. So I'm of two minds about it, because I think having that data fuse at scale requires AI, right? It requires AI. So I kind of buy their excuse that, hey, how can I build this big brain if I don't crawl your data? So yeah, I think, and even Google just came out with a new specification, just I think like a few months ago. But it's only them; they're the only ones respecting it. Like a way for publishers to say, how do you treat my data? Yeah, it'd be interesting. It also reminds me. I used to attend the Semantic Technology Conference on a regular basis, and I still remember vividly the when Google announced schema.org at Semtech, and everybody was like, "We were not consulted." They just created a schema without talking to the experts. And you know what? You know, because they have the machine, they have the ability to crawl, and they're the one compiling the big index. So, and if you look at schema.org, they have since started engaging the community more, and it's more like a traditional. Even the academics are active, and it's very pragmatic, right? Because how do people find knowledge and data nowadays? You have to be indexed by Google. You have to be indexed by the AI chatbots. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny relationship because it does benefit and you see a lot more alignment or offered integrations with other schemas and some activity between DCAT and schema.org.
Yep.
And that's very interesting, but ultimately Google also benefits from people using schema.org. I was fascinated because I was helping someone who had a business and when filling out their business information, they were brought for a container website for their business. It was like Squarespace or something like that. And in filling out and populating all of the information so that their business could appear for Google search, but also on a map, location data, they were brought into a little portal that was, through Google Map using schema.org.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating because it's like, it's now seems to be proliferating itself. And it's a good thing, but it's also in some ways, it's an agreement with Google and
Right,
other.
and that's it's all again going back to incentives, right?
Yeah.
How do you get people to fill out metadata?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll get you traffic if you fill out your, and the whole industry was born, SEO, right? It's basically how do you structure the schema.org, the metadata behind your DCAT markup, your schema.org markup.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was just thinking, speaking of the data curation process that you've evolved over a period of time, that seems to be a major milestone in your journey to implementing open data systems. Could you describe some of the other key lessons learned while implementing open data systems, in addition to this data curation process you described?
Yeah, so beyond curation, one thing that we think should be useful too is enrichment of the data to get people to share their data. This phenomenon. Oh, this is my data. Right? They're very protective of it. So, and how do you entice them to share their data? So beyond semi-automating curation and giving them insights about their data quickly, one thing we did also was enriching the data with non-controversial high value data sets like the census, FBI data, labor statistics data, to further give that data some additional context that it's available, but it doesn't mean they have the time nor the ability to enrich that data on their own. So we want to make it not only friction free, the whole process of metadata curation, but you actually get additional data beyond what you put in, right? Like if I put in this address, one boundary that people are not very familiar with is what's my congressional district, right? Which changes every 2 years or so. So based on the time and the location, your district, you might be represented by somebody else. What if I put in an address and then it gives me all these metadata suggestions, and then it enriches my data with additional data that you don't have. So that's one other thing that it's all about the success of your open data program basically lies on the data producers. How do you keep them engaged? It needs to make their day-to-day work more efficient. And actually, if you go to a lot of jurisdictions, sometimes the number one customers of open data is not the general public. It's other agencies in the same jurisdiction. Because even their colleagues find it harder to get it through official channels. That data is good enough for me, right? So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no,
I'm
absolutely.
curious. Oh, sorry, Drew. I was going to ask about CCAN because I just realized that many of our listeners may not be familiar with CCAN.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I would love to dive into that and just learn a little bit about what CCAN is, if you can share.
Yeah, so CCAN stands for the Comprehensive Knowledge Archive Network. It was started as a project by this gentleman in the UK, Rufus Pollock, in 2005. And when the whole open data phenomenon started, when Tim Berners-Lee gave that talk at TED, if you look at the TED talk, he credited Rufus as the originator of that idea. And then, yeah, so it's a project that is being used by a lot of, traditionally in the public sector, like data.gov, like Canada uses it. It's the largest data portal platform. It's open source. That's being used across the world for data catalogs. But unlike other proprietary solutions, it's a platform. So people have built all kinds of extensions on top of it. Right now, we're actually launching what we're calling the ecosystem catalog next month. And what it is it catalogs all the sites and all the innovations and extensions built by the ecosystem and linking them together. Yeah. It's not just used for open data. A lot of this innovation we're doing now with metadata being pre-filled for you actually was born out of a project we did with a hedge fund. Because at the end of the day, CCAN is not just it's a data catalog platform. So they wanted a data catalog of all their data assets. And we said, okay, we'll help you build that. Short story, the pilot failed because their data velocity was so high. They wanted their metadata updated every night, and the metadata inferred every night and updated in their data catalog. So that becomes a single source of truth for the metadata for all the data holdings. Like, in a hedge fund, it's kind of weird because they have all these data that they get from all kinds of weird places, satellite images, subscriptions, some a model data you run that produces data. So I was fascinated that in that hedge fund they didn't really have a central source of the truth for their metadata, but they wanted it updated at a nightly basis. And out of that was the insight that we need to be able to get this metadata quickly, even though that pilot failed. So now we're using a lot of the learnings there and some of the code we developed to really do quick, how do we get the metadata quickly?
Yeah. And efficiently. And I think that's what most people don't understand CCAN. Would you say it's a standard?
It is the largest. It has the largest footprint among in the data portal space. Uh, so I would like to think it's a de facto standard.
De facto standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful, and it's interesting because I think many don't realize that it can work for enterprises, for private enterprise. In addition,
Yeah.
so data catalogs indeed are not new. That's another learning. They've been
Yeah.
around for a while.
Right.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of working with CCAN and really loved CCAN when I was working at Department of Justice. I had full adoption across all of the program offices there, which was great.
Yeah, we were actually hoping, there was guidance that was published the week before inauguration by the Office of Management and Budget, how to use DCAT3 across all the agencies as mandated by the Evidence Act.
Yeah.
And we were looking at it as almost like a Y2K-like event. Okay, they need to be compliant to be describing their data holdings using DCAT3 by next year. And we thought, oh, we can ride that wave, right? But I don't know where that stands now with what's happening in DC.
Yeah, it's interesting because the first administration, again, I think we're trying to steer away from politics, but the Open Data Act, the Evidence Act, was supported by Trump in the first administration.
Yeah. It was bipartisan support, unanimously passed. It was one of those rare pieces of legislation. But hopefully, I think it's still, have we passed 100 days already? Maybe they're still busy doing things.
Yes.
Hopefully, when the dust settles, they still have to, okay, we need the data for the AI and everything.
And that's the one thing, the one truth is that open data has served AI very well.
Yeah.
So, and it's been fundamental to a lot of the training data, which has helped all of us playing in the semantic space, because we can leverage the shape and the format. And obviously AI thrives off of structured and semi-structured data.
Yeah. And, if you, as with most government services, hopefully that gives you the audience, so that once the demand is there, people expect it. So when you turn off the open data faucet, or maybe they'll hear from some of their constituents and say, hey, it's my open data.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that in terms of, again, not to get into politics, but there has been a lot of disruption in the open data environment, and yet open data has provided a lot for organizations and society. So do you see this as an inflection point, an opportunity for the future of open data? How do you see the future of the open data and the data commons in general?
I'm optimistic. Data is like essential, right? It's the oil, the new oil, whatever they call it. It's essential, for all kinds of things. And I'm just hoping the project we're doing right now with the University of Pittsburgh is once again going back to the commons and the tragedy of the commons. CCAN, like I said, is the de facto standard, right? But oftentimes, even system integrators, and we find implementations being built by different people, and there's very limited, and I think this is not unique to CCAN. I think it's true for most open source projects. People just keep taking and there's no contribution back. So we're trying to find out, if we are to build up this highway for data, how do people pay for it, right? And there are conversations right now in digital public infrastructure, public interest technology. How do we use that data? Nowadays, there's a lot. there's a lack of trust of government, right? And I think it's not just a US phenomenon, it's throughout the world. And open data, I hope, could not just be training material for the AIs and things for Google to index, but hopefully maybe we can find a way to, how do we deploy that data that we used to collect when we were still filling out forms on paper and modernize it, right? Like and maybe when the dust settles with Doge, because a lot of the infrastructure was broken, that will be an opportunity for us to modernize it and do things like what Estonia did, or like what Taiwan did with its digital government, right? Or Singapore, right? They don't really, they're small entities, so they can really modernize. And Estonia, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, they had opportunity to rebuild everything in the age of computers, right? So they had the ability to make everything digital. And with tax season just passing, uh, like the amount of work we have to do, right? I mean, and then you hear from your European friends, "Oh, I just signed something; it's taken care of already." How do we get maybe open data once the dust settles, when Doge does its work, would be an opportunity for us to rebuild something that's maybe has AI, has more modern data architecture that puts data governance, data management up front, rather than us just collecting things in different silos and not sharing it, right? Maybe, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Jessica, Andrew? You guys are in the front lines too.
I would agree. One of the things I've noticed, especially most recently, is that of the systems that I'm aware of in the institutional space, many of them were modeled. They're basically a zeitgeist of their times. They're modeled after departmental enterprise systems, so they're very infrastructure heavy, right? And so when you don't have something that's directly paying for it, it's a public good, and then that gets reevaluated. It forces you to rethink. Are there other ways in which we can publish valuable open data that perhaps pushes some of the burden on to the people who really depend on it and value it? And perhaps that it makes it easier for a publisher to decouple themselves from the serving of the data is really the biggest burden for publishers, is to maintain that life cycle. So maybe there'll be something that'll come out of that, right? Anyway, that's my thought, Jessica.
I, of course, am going to bring in the librarian perspective, and I think that librarians have demonstrated this very well, because you have academic libraries, you have public libraries, you have some private repositories even that participate, and you even have enterprises that support these efforts, integrations with Wikidata and Wikipedia as well, some other open knowledge sources. And so I envision for the future more of a cooperative, multifaceted aspect, to supporting open data and the data commons. The OCLC's 10-year plus project on linked data that proved that across private enterprises, academic institutions, publishers, and public libraries, they were able to create this rich linked data ecosystem that moved cataloging, in sort of the same vein to entity management and resolution. Again, sort of incentivizing, because you can help align your data set with other data sets and create this really rich ecosystem and benefit from the connections or relationships found within. So, that's, it may be pie in the sky, but I do have a vision or a dream that will move more towards that model. And I always have a question in my head is, because it's used for AI training, it's so instrumental for AI training, the data commons, knowledge commons. Is there some sort of model that where there's some sort of financial support that can be structured from private enterprises using public open data?
Yeah.
That would, interesting.
Yeah, you hope, the same way we pay the gas tax, right,
Yeah.
to support the highway infrastructure.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Is there a way maybe where we convert data almost like a utility, right? That the same way we pay for gas, the same way we pay for electricity, that, you know, it's not just a one-way relationship. You have somebody has to pay,
Right.
right?
And especially if people want that data to be maintained,
hmm
is the freshness, of that data is also instrumental for creating reliable um, results from AI systems. So,
Right, right. And I always say, I think like the Census Bureau is like one of the few agencies mandated by the Constitution, right?
yeah,
What if we translate that we need a Census Bureau at the hyperlocal level,
right.
right? Organizing this data, and then we have this data commons.
Yes.
It's annotated, it's enriched, it has high quality, high resolution metadata, and we have this river of data going back to water, Andrew, that we can all share,
Yes. It's a
curate,
shared
and protect.
resource right now. And
Right.
that's what's so fascinating is it's a shared common resource, much like water.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think of it as infrastructure, essentially, and I know others should share that opinion. And perhaps the absence of what we come to depend on, more and more people will realize the same, right? It is
Right.
infrastructure. Yeah.
But what is that switch that turns that on so it's accepted by everybody, right? Like one of the things that we were envisioning when we were first acquired by OpenGov is, what if you get that tax statement on that index card every year from your local municipality that tells you, well, you paid this much and you got this much in services because we trace everything back. Oh, this is how much the utility was used to clean your water, and this is their budget. And then you can see, oh, this is school that your child goes to.
Yeah.
And then we compute KPIs at the household level. Maybe we can, I don't know. Let's see.
I mean, we all experience that with the advent of cell phones and the
Mhm.
taxes, networking charges, and fees. And there is something important about at least supporting these initiatives and having some sort of finance model.
Right.
But we're going into the unknown right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am a glass half full kind of guy.
Mhm.
I think the old bureaucracies needed reinventing,
Yes.
and maybe because now they're kind of hollowed out. Hopefully, we get the opportunity to rebuild them, but hopefully build them in a way that doesn't that goes the right way, not
Not the
the
wrong.
other way where it becomes just everybody grabs my share.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and gardens everywhere.
Right. Yeah, back to walled gardens. And that's, I think I agree that it's such a great opportunity and so important to leverage. It's an inflection point in society. Um, yeah, and delivers immense value. And I think, what your project with Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh with the University of Pittsburgh, is that correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Which is a fascinating example where the project was moved into a university or institution, but it's still
Yeah,
dealing with civic. And so that's a great example of that sort of collaborative environment where it's economizing the resourcing and talent.
right. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're reaching the top of the hour, Joel. Any final wisdom for us?
No, I remain hopeful. And this to me is, some people joke, oh, you have a lifestyle business. This is my passion. I will be at it until they tell me to stop, or I merge with the AI.
Very
If
good.
people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
LinkedIn is the best way. I stopped using social media, so I'm now just using LinkedIn for everything.
Okay.
Just look for that here, or look for JQ Natividad, and GitHub as well. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great having you, Joel.
I think we meandered a bit. Sorry about that.
That's what makes for a good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you kept me on